Hey everybody, welcome back to Asmodeah City, and I am Lord Giarth. I'll be your adventure host today as usual. And today we're going into part 2 of our series on the 3D Canvas module by Ripper. Now, this is a paid module. It is not a free module. So if you don't know about that, please go back and take a look at my first video in this series. We'll talk about installation, and that'll give you some information about how you can get this module. It's pretty impressive. So yes, again, today we are going to be talking about part 2. Today we're really kind of going to be going over some of the basics of drawing kind of a building like you see right now, although kind of not as detailed. We're going to get into the detail in more videos moving forward, but we're going to talk about just how do you draw a building? I mean, how do you create something in 3D? Now that you've got it installed. So let's talk about part 2 of the 3D Canvas module by the Ripper after this. Hey everybody, wanted to introduce you to something new. So I'm going to just type it in here. Oh, you can see I've been there before. And here we are. Asmodeah now has its own shop. It is new, at least at the moment of this recording. So you'll notice we've got a few things in here, and we're starting to grow as we can, as much as we can. I am planning an awful lot of dice options, and I know you're only seeing really 5 options here, but if you kind of take a deeper dive, you'll see that we have lots of different options in some of these selections that you can see, and some of these dice are just so cool. So for those that are, and I have this liquid infused dice as well. These are so cool because when you shake them, that liquid works inside to kind of sparkle, and it is balanced, so it doesn't cause the dice to kind of flip or roll in an odd way. So we have all sorts of different types of dice. They even come with these neat tin canisters for some of them. And I also am putting in more of the books. Certainly more of the D&D books are coming in here. And we each actually have gift cards. So if you're looking for a gift for your gamer, feel free. You can purchase one of the gift cards. We'll even send them if you click on here, send them a personalized message to go along with your gift card. So take a look at the new Asmodeah, boy, I can't even speak, Asmodeah shop. And watch it grow, because it will be growing by leaps and bounds here in the coming weeks and days. So enjoy, everyone. Hope to see you there. Hope you can support us. It'd be awesome. Thanks so much. All right, everybody, welcome back. And again, I'm Lord Giarth. And once again, I will remind you, if you have not done so already, please hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, hit that like button, because that helps us immensely for growing this channel. And don't forget to hit that bell as well. I'm going to be kind of cranking out some of these videos for the 3D Canvas kind of quickly, because I know you guys kind of want to get into it. And you're not going to want to wait weeks to try to find out information on this. So yes, hit that bell button, please. And I will, of course, remind you once again about our Discord server, which is in the URL that's here. Again, this URL, and I remind everybody of this on every video, this is a browser URL. It is not a Discord URL. So enter this into your browser. That'll take you to a page that lets you join our Discord server. And please join that, because then you can either get help or help others that need it. All right. So let's get into this. So in our last video, we talked about the installation. And if you have not done so already, and you've installed the module by copying the folder over to your server like we had described, then do make sure that you turn the module on. Otherwise, none of what we're going to be able to do, what we're doing here today, you'll be able to do, right? So just to remind you how to do that, go to your settings, the settings at the top, the game settings, go to manage modules, and I'm just going to scroll up to the top here. I've got a ton of modules, so you probably don't see 2/3 of what I have here. But I've got the 3D Canvas module turned on and activated for my server, in this world, I should say. And I have a couple of others that we will be talking about later in other videos. But for right now, what's the most important is turning on this 3D canvas. That's kind of the most important part of that. And once you've done that, click on save. It'll reload your world, and then you're good to go at that point. So, all right. So now that we've got it installed and we've got it turned on and ready to go, what do we do next? What's the next move? So let's draw some simple buildings. Let's make use of some of the simplest, most basic tools of 3D. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scene. That's kind of obviously your first step, is to create a scene. So just like any other scene, I'm going to go up here to my scenes, and I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click on create scene. Go away, there we go. And just like any other scene, it pops up with this. However, now you've got this new option that says quick 3D scene. Now, if you wanted to kind of create this, random terrain looking, it could be grass, it could be sand, it could be dirt, it could be any number of things with, various kind of elevations to it and things like that, you could click on that and kind of get a randomly generated scene. Now, I don't want to do that today because I know what we want and I want to create it from scratch. So clearly what I want to do in this case is just not click that and click create scene. But let's just call this one test scene. All right, if I could only spell. And we'll click on create. And just like any other scene here, you see that it's got, the basics, but you also will notice this new option at the far right, which is 3D canvas. Now we'll go into that in a second. What I do first in almost all scenes that I create is make a couple of quick changes here, just so that I've got it set up the way I want. So let me first point out a couple of quick things to you. First, I go to grid, and you'll notice that the grid size in pixels is set to 100, meaning, each grid is 100 pixels by 100 pixels, right? Now, most content creators, at least that I have been dealing with, are creating in 150 pixel sizes. So I changed this to 150. Now, your mileage may vary, and you want to, look at the content that you're bringing in. But what that does is if your content creators are creating at 150 pixels per grid square, and you've got it set to 100, then you go to bring in your content and it doesn't size correctly to the grids, right? So you want to I want to set it to 150 to be more consistent with the content creators that I'm dealing with. Now, again, your mileage may vary on that. So, you might feel like just leaving it at 100 is fine. And that's totally fine if that's what works for you. Now, the next thing I do, and you're going to notice something that's going to happen, by the way, after I do this next one, when we go to create the scene, and you'll see that in a minute. I'll point it out. But you'll notice that the width and the height are by default 4,000 by 3,000. Now, I happen to know that the scene I'm going to be creating here with you doesn't need to be that big. And why have all that big wasted space around the outside of it that we don't really need? So I'm going to kind of size this down a little bit. I'm going to make it 2,400 by 1,800. Now that's going to cause a warning to come up when we create it, the scene. We go to create the scene, and you'll see that in a second. So that's why that warning's coming up. Now I leave the padding at 25 or 0.25 because I do want that extra little bit of space on the outside around my map, because we are literally going to be placing tokens that we're going to be using to move things around, like lights and stuff, that will be outside of the building. And so I want that little extra padded space just to be able to make sure that I've got some room to put those things in. Okay, so those are kind of the first two things I do pretty much almost all scenes that I create, especially if I know the size of what I want to create. Now, I guess I could point this out real quickly. You'll see this foreground image that's here. I'm sorry, the background image is the one we want to use. And the map space, just the flat map space when you create it, can have an image on top of it. The reason I'm pointing this out to you right now is sometimes when people build 3D maps, they utilize 2D maps as kind of a blueprint. So you probably know where I'm going with this. If you take that map image and it's properly sized, properly laid out to the grid and so on, you put that map image on as a, I don't know why I guess background makes sense because it's below it, but either which way, if you put that map image and it in here and it becomes kind of the top of your mapping space, then you could then build out your 3D buildings to match that 2D layout. I hope that makes sense. So imagine having a 2D layout and you want to make it 3D. Well, the best way to do that if you really want to make it size specific and correct is to utilize that image as a blueprint, draw on, create your buildings on top of it, and then get rid of it. So you don't see it anymore, you don't need it anymore, it's gone, right? So that's kind of just a side tip that I'll give you about this. Now let's move on to this new 3D canvas option that we have on the right. And when I click on this, please don't panic. I know there's a ton of stuff that's on here. We are not going through all this today. As a matter of fact, we're only going to touch on a few things today, but through this series of videos, we will talk about all, if not all, virtually all of these different settings in one way or another. We'll go through them as we need them. So the first three things that we need are these top three options here. Enable for players, click, of course, because otherwise they're not going to be able to see it in 3D. Now, why the second one is separate from the top one, I don't know, but it is. So whatever it is, whatever the reason is for that, doesn't really matter. But I'm going to click the second one to enable 3D on load, which means as they load this scene, it's going to load in 3D mode. And as I mentioned in my installation video, you don't need anything special. You just need your browser. That's it. So it's all working in WebGL, and so you don't have to worry about that. So the third one I do turn on, and I'll just kind of give this one little caveat. I turn this one on because it tends to make the look of things when you're dragging like a token into the distance and some other things better in terms of the calculations of where these things are being placed. Now, there are those that say that there is a bit of a performance hit with that. I haven't seen that, but to be fair, I have a pretty powerful machine, so I haven't seen it, but there have been others that have said that it does give you a bit of a performance hit. So, your mileage may vary on this one, and if you feel like it is giving you a performance hit, just turn it off. It's not a big deal. All right, so I turn those three on very first. Now, then we come to this one, and I laugh because I just think it's funny that it's set to this. But the max elevation, which is essentially the maximum allowed, it says a maximum allowed elevation for tokens on this scene. Now, since it's set to 100,000, and we're going to be building what we would consider a dungeon here, although nothing is really underground in terms of reality. It looks underground, but it is, elevated above the flat map space, the flat map grid. But so, your elevation becomes important when and you're going to see this, by the way, and how we create some of this stuff, especially I think in the next video. You're going to see why it's important to set this correctly. But we're not flying into outer space here. So we don't need 100,000 feet of max elevation, right? It's just not necessary. So, and I don't know actually if that's what it considers feet in air quotes or pixels or what have you, but I can just tell you this: we don't need 100,000. I guarantee you we don't need it. What I do need is to make sure that I cap, in this case, I cap the max elevation for my tokens so that they don't get the opportunity to like walk up a set of stairs and then fall off the edge. And then now they're in oblivion that they can't get out of, right? So you want to max it out to where they can go up only so high and then they can't go any further. So I set this to 10. Now, that will kind of depend on, and if you look off to just to the right here, the height of these walls. That height will determine pretty much what you want to set this max elevation to. But I can tell you as the default, just the default when you're building out a building, which we're going to do in a second, that 10 is fine. It gets to the point where your token can't go beyond 10, so they can't kind of jump off the edge. And I'll show you that in just a second. All right, so that's pretty much all we need to do right now to get us started. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and slide down here to the bottom and click on Save Changes. Now, here's that warning that I was telling you about. Whenever you change the dimensions of your scene, and you may have even seen this in your 2Ds when you're creating 2D maps, if you ever change that 4,000 by 3,000 to anything different, it's going to throw this warning. And that kind of is a protection, and I can tell you it protected me a couple of times when I had already created a map and then I decided I wanted to change my dimensions of it like an idiot. And I did that, and I said yes to this, and now all the stuff I placed on my map was all whacked out and in weird spaces and places, and it was like, oh my gosh, everything got moved to different spots. So that's why this warning is popping up. Now, it's probably not necessary, I guess, for it to pop up when you're first creating the scene, but certainly after you've created the scene, if you change that information, then you want this to pop up here. So that's why this is coming up. So I'm just obviously going to say yes, because it doesn't really matter. All right, so now I've created this new test scene, so let's jump over to that. And it loads up the 3D tools, and here we are. We are now in our base scene with nothing on it, just ready to kind of go. Now, let me go over a couple of quick things regarding controls. Now, how do I control my camera in 3D? Now, I have turned on, and let me kind of show you really quickly. If I go here to my game settings, and I go to configure settings, and then I go to 3D canvas, you'll see I have alternate camera controls turned on. Now, this kind of changes the way that the middle button is used as opposed to just the right mouse button to control certain things in conjunction with the keyboard, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. But I turn that on because for me, it's just easier, I guess is the way to describe it. Now, you could certainly turn it on and turn it off, and the controls information is available to you, and I'll show you where to find that. But for right now, this is the way I do it, and that's why when I describe this to you, it is the way that it is, and it's not the default that you might see when you first come in to control the camera in 3D. So let me go ahead and close that. And here's what I mean by that. Now, I use, with this alternative camera controls, when I use the right mouse button and I drag, I'm panning the scene. So I can go left, right, up, down, round, whatever. I'm just panning the camera around the scene, right? Now, if I want to rotate this, I hold the shift key down, and then I drag with the right mouse button, and now I'm rotating in 3D space. I can go up, down, I can go around, I can do whatever I want in rotation of the camera in 3D space. Now, if I want to zoom in, I use the center wheel. I use the wheel, and I go in, and I can come out, and so on. Okay? So that's kind of how I use the controls. There are some differences, and I'll probably point that, well, now, all right, I'll show you right now kind of really quickly. If you go over here to this little icon here, this little arrow, you'll see that it's kind of docked onto the side. And by the way, here's a little tip, something I found out on my own. I used to use a module that would adjust the look and feel of these icons at the top. And that module made it so that I couldn't see this little arrow unless I had collapsed everything down, and then it would appear. So if that's happening to you, to where when you're opened out here or expanded out for your controls, you don't see that little arrow, that's the problem. You probably have a module that's modifying the look and feel of your UI, and so because of that, it's hiding it. So if that's happening, then just collapse this down, and now you've got your little icon here to be able to expand out the 3D controls. So when I expand this out, there's this show controls option here. And if I click on it, it's just the question mark. And if I click on it, you'll see it shows you the controls on how to rotate around and what to do at a zoom and so on. It shows you all of that. This information will change depending on that setting that we just looked at that said alternative camera controls. These settings will change depending on that. So if you ever want to know what they are for you, just go over here to this little show controls, click on it, and that'll pop up for you. Now this typically pops up right when you first load the scene, but it's kind of so fast that you don't really get a chance to see it. So that's how you get to it. All right. So now that we have that, let's do some drawing. Let's create something here. I'm going to turn the pause off to get that out of the way. All right. So let's just kind of create a building really quick. Let's just kind of create something really fast that's just down and dirty. Okay. So let's kind of grab the tools over here, and you'll notice on the 3D controls that we have here that this one right here is dungeons and interiors. How convenient. We're going to build a dungeon. So let's just kind of click on that one, and it brings up these controls here. Now, we're not going to go through all of these today, but we will go through a few of them just so that you can kind of get started. One of the ones that I'm going to point out to you really quick is this interior elegant theme right here. That is the default. And what does that mean? Let me show you. When I've got add on here and I've got rectangle here, and I just want to drag, and I'm not going to do this to any specs, but if I kind of just drag it and drop it, it pops up with this building, which is really cool. But you'll notice that when I rotate around here a little bit, you'll see the floor, if I go in, is kind of this nice old tile floor, and then we've got the kind of multi-colored bricks and stuff. That's the theme called interior elegant. Now, let me come back out here, and let's kind of square it up a little bit. And I'm going to go to my tile controls, and I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to select everything and just delete it. All right. So now if I wanted to change the theme, I just click on this drop down here and I select what I want. Now, the one that I like to use for my scenes and what we are going to be building is the interior wooden. So I'm just going to select that. And so now let's draw some stuff, and let me kind of show you how to use some of these tools. So first of all, obviously adds to your drawing. Subtract will take away, knife will cut holes in the walls and things, and I'll show you each of those in a second. We're not going to do stair today. We'll do that in our next video. So, but what I want to do is let me just kind of draw out something, and I'm going to give you kind of a quick tip. And by the way, if you're noticing that there are kind of breaks in the lines here, you may be noticing that in this recording. You may not. I know it didn't show up in one of my other ones, but it did in a different one. So if you're noticing that, those are just kind of glitches, I guess is probably the best term, in the way that it's drawing some of this stuff. And you'll notice if I zoom in, those go away. But if I zoom out, they kind of become more apparent. So don't worry about them. They're there. It's just the way that it shows up in terms of the video. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create let's create a 40 by 40 space. So again, I've got my tile controls on. I've got place tile. I need to make sure that's there. And I go to add, and I've got rectangle. And so I'm going to start like top left here, right at this corner, and I'm going to just drag out. And you'll notice something interesting. If I want to make sure that my drawing is actually drawing exactly the way I want it to, and actually, I'm noticing something. There it goes. Okay, I got it now. Yeah, I didn't have it in the right space. So you'll notice if you wanted to draw a perfect square, as an example, you'll notice the oops, I moved it down. There we go. Okay. So you'll notice that that red diagonal line is going through each of those grid squares perfectly, top left to bottom right. Now, if I go a little bit more, you'll see it says 45 feet. But if I go all the way down, it still says 45 feet. But you'll notice where those diagonal lines are going, they're not perfect in each one of those grid squares. Then that means it's, first of all, not a perfect square. But that 45 being the same here as it is here is a little deceiving. And so that's just kind of a quirk in this module. And, again, this is a newer module that may change later on. It's not exactly perfect. If you use any part of this grid down here at the bottom that is 45 feet, it's going to say 45 feet. So if you go halfway through it, it says 45 feet. And if you go all the way through it, it says 45 feet. But I want a perfect square. So what I'm concerned with is looking at that diagonal line going perfectly top left to bottom right through each one of those grid squares. So I'm just going to let that go. And you'll notice now, by the way, and let me go back into my token controls, which you sometimes have to do if you want to rotate around. You'll notice now it's different. Now we have these kind of wooden looking bricks and this interesting pattern on the floor. That's the different tiles that it sets up under this particular theme. So, all right, I'm going to rotate back up. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit because I want to show you a couple of other things. So first of all, let's say I wanted to add a roundish room at the bottom corner here that would be used maybe as a dining room or I don't know, whatever you'd like. So I'm going to leave it on add. I'm going to go to ellipse here in this side. And now I'm going to start from the inside. And I'm going to draw out a little space. I'm not going to go too far. And there we go. It just added that little roundish looking room at the bottom part of the room that we're in here. Now let's say I wanted to add, let's add a hallway that, or maybe what would be considered a stairway. Now again, we're not going to do stairs today, but just like a space for the stairs. So I'm going to go to my rectangle, back to my rectangle, and I'm still on add. And I'm going to start on the inside, and I'm just going to draw out a space here. Yeah, let's make it a little longer. There we go. And boom, there it drops in a space for my stairway, if I wanted to put a stairway in there. But let's say I think, oh gosh, you know what? That's too long. I really don't want it to be quite that long. I want it to be more, a little shorter. So what I'll do is I'll go to subtract. And again, I've got the rectangles selected, but I'm using subtract now. And now in this case, you don't have to go from the inside, but you can just see if I kind of start drawing, and let's say I just want to cut it back a little bit, you'll see I draw out the space there, and then I let go, and it just cuts that space out. So now I've gotten rid of that extra long space that I didn't want. So now let's say I want to add an opening. And I'm going to tilt up here just to kind of show you what I mean. Let's say I want to make an opening right here, so it's really a hallway. It's not a stairway, okay? So let me rotate back up to make it easier to see. I'm going to pan over to make it a little more square. And I'm going to go to knife. Now again, I've got rectangle selected. And I'm going to go from the inside here. And I'm going to open up. Oh, I need to be on tile controls, and I need to be on place tile. My fault. And I'm going to go from the inside here. And I'm just going to kind of cut this little space out. Oh, and I went a little too far on that right side. So let's undo that. And I'm hitting Control Z to undo that. So let's start from here, and I'll make it a little shorter. And I'm afraid it's going to cut into that again. Yeah, it did. So let me go a little bit less. And by the way, you can do the same thing as you do with any other kind of finite, fine movement. Is I'm going to use the Shift key. I'm going to hold the Shift key down while I'm dragging this. And then I'll let go. There we go. And it didn't cut it exactly the way I wanted, but you're getting the gist of this, right? So now if I go back and I rotate up, you can see now I have an opening to go into my wall. Now, obviously I need to clean that up a little bit, but you're getting the idea of what we want to do. Let's say we wanted to put another opening over here. And so what I'll do is I'll just kind of bring this up. Let me square it up a little bit so it looks a little nicer. Again, I'm using knife and rectangle, and I'm going to go in my tile controls, go to place tile, and then I'm going to drag this to cut an opening in the wall here, and bingo. So now I've got an opening in that wall. Okay? So now you're kind of getting the idea of how you can draw with some of these tools. And I think I'm going to leave it here because I don't want to get too far in depth into this. I want to make these in bite-sized chunks, but you kind of get the idea now of how to create a building. And you could see how, for example, if you were to put, like I had mentioned at the beginning of this, you put that background 2D map on your kind of white map space here and draw your 3D map right on top of it so that it then looks the same in terms of space and placement and all that, but it's actually in 3D space. So let's leave it here, guys, and we will be going into much more detail as we go along. I'm going to be talking about a lot of the different things like making prefabricated lights and all kinds of things like the scene changes and things like that. Something that you may have noticed is that when you're looking at the scene initially, if I rotate all the way up, you've got this kind of blue sky. Looks really cool, and you've got this dirt thing or sand thing kind of going off into oblivion, off into the outside. But we're going to be changing that because in a dungeon we don't want blue sky with clouds, right? So we'll be talking more about that in the next upcoming sessions. So once again, just like I always remind you, if you like this video and you would like to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. It helps us out tremendously. And if you want to be notified of, upcoming videos that are coming out, and again, I'm going to be kind of cranking through some of these 3D canvas ones so that you don't have to wait too long. So if you want to be notified of those, hit that bell button so that you get notified of the new videos that come up. And again, I will remind you of our Discord server. So if you have an interest and would like to ask questions, or if you have some knowledge and you'd like to help people that are asking questions, please join our Discord server. Again, that is a browser URL that you're looking at, not a Discord URL. So jump into that. It'll let you do that. And otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to seeing you in part 3 of this series, where we're going to go into a bit more detail on how to kind of customize your new dungeon and how to make it look really cool, adding stairs, lights, and all that other kind of stuff. Really appreciate you guys being here. Leave any comments below. I will do my best to answer them. But as always, when you're adventuring, be careful, be safe, and be kind. Peace.